some guest speakers. And we have two very special guests today, Rico Phillips and Slone. Now, the pandemic really did show us the importance of hockey to our communities. We heard it from the kids. You know, it was bringing them back. It was meeting friends. It was being part of a team once again. And we know players couldn't get on the ice, and it did impact their lives. Now, the pandemic changed the world around us, and organizations both inside and outside of sports in Canada are now navigating what we're calling the new normal. And the OMHA is no different at all. The vision continues to be leaders in community sport and making hockey the sport of choice in Ontario. And this includes addressing one barrier to participation: inclusivity. Our two guests today are passionate about hockey and making our sport much more inclusive. I'd like to introduce Slone. Tara, come on up. Tara is a Juno-nominated musician, an award-winning television host, and she can be seen every week on Rogers Hometown Hockey. Thanks for coming. And Rico Phillips. I had the opportunity to meet Rico via Zoom. Rico was in Nashville at the time, and the internet was at the time. So he would speak, and we'd all wait. Everybody else on the Zoom call was waiting, and then the rest of what he had to say came out. And you know what? It was worth every single second that we had to wait, because what he has to say is important to listen to. In 2010, Rico founded the Inner City Youth Hockey Program in Flint, Michigan, where he grew up. And his idea was to increase more racial and socioeconomic inclusivity in minor hockey. Rico is a recipient of the NHL's Willie O'Ree Community Hero Award, and with good reason. He was named to the Ontario Hockey League, as well as the first ever Director of Cultural Diversity and Inclusion in July of 2020. Rico, can you come and join us here on the stage? And not only the winner of the Willie O'Ree Award, we were talking, and he talks to Willie O'Ree on the phone on a regular basis. And I love what he had to say, and maybe we'll get to that a little later on about getting involved in hockey and staying involved in hockey and in society in general. So let's start off. Where does your passion for hockey come from, Rico?
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for allowing me to be here. The OMHA, it's a very prestigious opportunity for me. My hometown is Flint, Michigan, so a little ways away, but one thing I do know is that the OMHA stands for quality hockey, minor hockey. And I had to learn that when I got my role at the OHL. I wasn't that familiar, but I quickly became familiar with the great work that all of you do. So if you don't mind, give yourselves a round of applause. I know that's real simple to do, but I tell you, it's important that you clap for yourselves, because you are the leaders. You're obviously here because you care about the sport, and more importantly, you care about youth in our sport. So to answer your question, Dan, the way I came involved in hockey is totally different than a lot of people. I didn't play as a little young person, but when I was in high school, I had an opportunity. I wanted to be a firefighter. My goal was to be a professional firefighter. So I was trying to figure out in high school how I could prepare to do that. And the hockey team had an opening for an athletic trainer. So, you know, I take care of the athletic injuries, and my first thought was hockey players get their teeth knocked out. This is going to be great for me. I love it. So I'm on board. But I really I'd seen hockey from afar. But when I watched my very first game at ice level, like all of us in here, I fell in love with the sport, and I wanted to do everything I could, so I learned how to ice skate with the team, and by the time I was in my final years in high school, I actually made the team. I got to be honest with you, Dan. There was spots for 20 players, a 20-person roster, and I was one of the first guys in the locker room, and I'm counting each player as they come in. 18, 19, And I was number 20, so I made the team. I really did not deserve to be on the team, but at that moment when I was on the team, I really threw myself into it, and I became an on-ice hockey official, and I have been one for 35 years. Shout out to the hockey referees out there. Yeah. And it was during that period, first actually first 2 months of my career that I want to share with you, something that occurred. This was in 1986, so quite a ways away from now. But anyways, I realized that that the sport didn't have diversity. We didn't use that term back then. There was no black people that played the sport, and I was actually, it was kind of a joke between my white friends and my black friends that I was actually attempting to play. But when I became a referee, within my second month, as many officials do in general, we blow a call from time to time. And I blew a call, and the head coach called me over. Now, keep in mind, these are 10 or 8-year-olds. You know, it's my first couple months of reffing. And the head coach called me over, and he's giving me the business, asking me what I was calling. I was just standing there looking at him, and his assistant coach came down, and he was screaming mad at me. Told me he was going to kick my tail in the parking lot and called me the N-word. But he didn't say the N-word, he said the word. Here I was, 17 years old, everyone. And that was the first time I faced what I did not realize was going to be such an intense lack of diversity in our sport. I was about to leave that game and never step back, never put on my skates ever again. I was convinced I was done. I wasn't going to be a part of something that's racist like that. And as my senior partner, once we got to the locker room, we said, "What are you doing?" And I told him, he said, "Rico, today's the day you either grow up or you stay a kid." I looked at him, I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "You are going to come across racist in your life. You're going to come across people that look at you because you're different. And if you run and tuck and go the other way and don't try to open up people's mind," he's doing exactly what he wanted. Like I said, I'm still here 35 years later, so apparently he didn't face me out.
We thank you. So Rico is American, you're Canadian, so we know why you get your passion for hockey. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 48 years old, and I grew up in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. During my elementary school years, I did not know one single girl who played hockey. So I didn't. I grew up watching Hockey Night in Canada like everybody else. I watched it with my dad. We were Habs fans. It was the only time. Sorry. It's my birth. You know, if you grow up in Nova Scotia, you're a Habs fan, a Leafs fan, or a Bruins fan. Anyway, it was the only time during the week I was allowed to swear, so I really enjoyed that. But I think I was drawn as a fan to the best parts of what I would consider hockey culture. You know, the good stuff, right? The camaraderie, the teamwork, the elevating others, everything that we love about this game, the dedication, the cheering for, the cheering against, and you know, through a whole circuitous bunch of circumstances, my career led me to hockey, you know, full time. And that's why I love what I do on Rogers Hometown Hockey, because we get to celebrate those amazing aspects of the game. So
well, I love it. When we were on the Zoom call, you called yourself an observer. And truly, that's what you guys have been doing with Hometown Hockey. Any stories that resonate with you that you know, you could pass along to folks here, that maybe things are very similar in many communities across the country?
I mean, honestly, there are so many. We've been to, probably many of your associations have hosted us. I'm guessing a lot of the kids that you work with have marched in our parades of champions, which unfortunately fell by the wayside this year, but hopefully they return. It has been a gift. I mean, this show, you know, has shown us the absolute best of humanity. The fact that people welcome us, they want to share their stories with us, they trust us to be conduits for their communities, for your communities, to the rest of the country. So, I mean, it's really hard to pick one story, but I think when you think about communities galvanizing to help, you know, Dylan is a story like that, and I'm sure many of you have heard of Alex Louie. Alex Louie had osteosarcoma, and we met up with him in Niagara Falls in 2017, and he had already come through one bout of osteosarcoma. He had part of his leg amputated. He was super anxious to get back on the ice. I mean, everybody just rallied behind him, everybody possible. And he was a huge Capitals fan and a huge OV fan. And anyway, because the hockey world is the hockey world, you know, he was able to meet up with the Capitals. He went to a game. Ovi scored a hat trick, and he kind of became the lucky charm, and they went on to win the Stanley Cup that year. We lost Alex in 2019, but it was just his whole journey and the way that he was supported by, of course, his family, but his second and chosen family, the hockey one. It's moments like that, but I have to tell you, across the country, every single week, right? There's no shortage of that, and it's truly just, you become overwhelmed with how beautiful people can be.
Well, we heard that from the kids. Same thing. It's getting back in that second community, the second family, as they said. Rico, and this one's, I mean, this is not a softball. This is a hard ball, probably a little bit inside too. But we're sitting here in a room right now, and let's face facts. It's a room filled with a lot of white people. The game of hockey is filled with a lot of white people. How do we open doors or make it feel comfortable for others, especially, I mean, a lot of people coming from other countries, and get them involved in hockey in the way we grow up and love the game, and make sure that they know that they feel comfortable when we don't necessarily know, how it feels for someone else to try and get into the game.
Well, that's one of those, like you said, that wasn't softball. That's hardball. No, the reason that's hardball is because each community is going to be a slightly different, right? I tell, I'm going to be very courageous with my conversation today. My plan is not to offend anybody. Don't worry about that part of it. But what I want to say is that depending on your community, it's not your fault that there's a lack of diversity in your community, right? That's just how your community is. It is so important, though, that each person takes an introspective look at who they are within a community and open up their minds and horizons to others that don't look like them, don't sound like them. How do you go about doing that? Nights like tonight is a perfect example. Educating yourselves. Don't live in the small, closed-off world that says, this is my norm, this is what makes me comfortable, and so this is the way we're going to do it. In the U.S., we have what's called Try Hockey for Free days. I don't know if there's something similar, I'm assuming, here with Hockey Canada. How many times do you, if that's the case, if you're recruiting for brand new hockey members to come out, first-timers, how often do we go in the not-so-typical areas? What in hockey, the low-hanging fruit is, in socioeconomic areas that are well-to-do and white. That's typical. Are we going and reaching out to others? Are we making sure that we have an inclusive mindset? I'm going to say a buzz term. If we don't intentionally include, we unintentionally exclude, if that makes sense. So it's important that you, in your strategy as you go forth over the summer, looking towards how do we prepare to open up our doors, the first thing is everybody needs to sit down together and say, where are our shortcomings? Do we have members of the LGBTQ plus community within our own organization that can help us, guide us through what's most appropriate? It's not going to be easy, but it's going to take some of you, first of all, learning about yourself, but second of all, being willing to learn about others. That's the basics to say, okay, let's welcome others into our fold. Because when I first came in, I'm going to tell you that I faced not only racial comments, just a feeling of feeling unwelcome, and you'd say, well, Rico, why did you stay? Because that was just a small fraction. All of you make up the bigger fraction. You're all good people. The majority of us care about each other, and we have to figure out how to make that so others look at hockey. We don't look at, if you're not a hockey person, like it's something that I shouldn't belong to.
Tara, as far as the female participation, and you talked about this growing up, you look at somebody like a Haley Wickenheiser and her involvement, and you look at some of the hirings now in the NHL. Do you see that making a difference down at the grassroots level more and more?
Yeah, I mean, it's another buzz term, and you hear it all the time, but representation matters. Like, it really does matter. If you don't see yourself reflected in a certain world, whatever it is, you don't believe that that you can be that. You don't have those aspirations. They simply don't exist. And it's like it tacitly tells you you can't be part of that world. So, I mean, I think, of course, the more things are modeled from the top down. I love that, that the Hillary Knights and the Haley Wickenheisers of the world, the Emily Castonguay, people who didn't she played NCAA, but she's not coming out of an Olympic team. That's important, but it has to be at all levels too, and I think that applies to anything we talk about here. It's really easy to look at the NHL and say, okay, well, of course they have the biggest stage and the biggest spotlight. They have to do this, and I do see a lot of women in the room, which is great, but it has to be at all levels because if I'm a 5-year-old and I'm not seeing myself reflected in the organization and the minor hockey organization in a relevant way, there's messaging there. It's kind of coded. So absolutely, strides are being made all over the place. And again, you do sometimes have to be intentional. I think the bottom line for me is no matter which world I inhabit, if I look around and everybody looks like me, that's not okay, right? It is, again, about being intentional, about hearing different voices, understanding that you're not going to have an understanding or a life experience, and so you kind of need that help.
Well, I guess that was going to lead into a conversation about hockey culture, and it can cover both topics, I guess. If you were to talk about hockey culture, how would you define it? And, is that a major impediment into inclusivity?
Well, it's pretty clear that it is a white male-dominated sport. It has been for a while. Things are changing. I am seeing more diversity, so it's not bleak, you guys, all right? I don't want you to think that Rico sits up here and goes, my gosh, I got such a tall mountain to climb, because I see it happening. But what I don't see happening is the diversity, it tends to stop at the players, but the involved people around them, that's where we're lacking diversity in what's called inclusion. Being diverse is a different reflection of all of us. Being inclusive means that that many of us have a seat at the table to speak about what we believe is important and prudent, and to hear what you believe is important and prudent. So when we look at coaching staffs, I'm just going to talk about the OHL, because I can't speak about the OMHA at all whatsoever. But in the OHL, what we're trying to do to provide more inclusivity is create opportunities for our players to learn more about each other's cultures. That includes Europeans, not just people of color. We're also looking for and hoping for recruitment of athletic trainers, equipment managers, people in the hockey ops that aren't reflected with any level of diversity, as I've seen thus far. And then as you move up the line, the business operations folks, and certainly general managers and owners, once we see a better reflection of all of our community, then we'll have some inclusivity. And when we see that inclusivity, you'll really start to see this hockey thing grow. It's really going to go in the direction that we're hoping for.
Tara, I mean, you're on the road a lot across Canada. Is this what you're seeing? Are you seeing changes in some of the faces in these organizations as you go from town to town?
Yes, some. I mean, I think, yeah, it's their baby
So it's
steps.
a start.
It's a start. But, and again, I'll echo what Rico just said. Like, this is important. These conversations are important. Communication is important. I mean, I would say in the 8-year journey on Rogers Hometown Hockey, we ourselves, I mean, I will acknowledge, we are almost an entirely white group of people. We've had to learn and unlearn a tremendous amount ourselves because, we're a bunch of like-minded, like-backgrounded people, that's not really a word, but, we're choosing the stories. And it was like at the very beginning, we're like, oh, we don't even have a single story about a woman, let alone a person of color, let alone, somebody from the local First Nation. So, I think baby steps, but, you really do have to be very, very purposeful, and it requires work. It requires ongoing work, and sometimes it's easy to close your eyes and your ears and your brain and just say, I can't relate to this. But at the end of the day, like Rico also said, this is the only way to truly grow the game. You know, I mean, let alone doing the right thing and being inclusive and open with your heart. But to actually grow this game and to make it the great game that we all know and love, that's what you have to do.
Rico, you mentioned at the table you were talking about working with players at the OHL level. I was fascinated because you tell them right off the bat that, you know, you're going to talk to them differently than anybody else has talked to them from an organizational standpoint. If you can just let people know how you relate with the players.
Yeah, so let me walk it back a little bit. So when I took the role with the OHL, I was very fortunate in the sense that the role was created for me. Back in 2020 in the U.S., George Floyd was tragically killed at the hands, so to speak, of a police officer. And that sparked, as you all know, it sparked things here in Canada as well, all across North America, in fact, many parts of the world. It's very similar for me personally. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do I wanted my voice to be heard. I knew I had something to say. And as I was indicating at the table, I called Willie O'Ree, and Willie said that your voice is being heard in hockey, Rico, so you better keep speaking because people are listening. And I didn't know what that meant, but I had an epiphany. So I contacted David Branch, the commissioner of the OHL. And it led to many conversations and the creation of this role and opportunity. But when I first got there was no way I was going to walk in, this guy, and say, oh, you guys have been doing it wrong this whole time. Now we're going to do it my way, right? The brother's here now, we're going to do it this way. No, that was not going to happen, trust me. But for me, it was more important to learn what the landscape really was. Like, I honestly didn't. I know about the Flint Firebirds because they're my hometown team, and maybe a little bit about Saginaw, but we won't talk about them. But anyways, so one of the first things I did was I did an informal study with former players of the OHL, recent within the last 3 to 5 seasons, and they were all players of color, which included black players, indigenous, South Asian, and Asian. So I tried to make sure I got a real good gamut, and the whole line of questioning was about their experience only from a cultural standpoint. And it opened my eyes up to so much good that was happening, and obviously there's going to be some areas we had to work on. But there's one area I want to share with you that was really magnified through the questioning, because it was all baseline questions. Everybody had the same questions. My question was, had you, in your hockey career, received racist taunts or slurs? Every one of them said yes. So I'm ready to start writing. When did this game happen? I'm thinking it's in the Ontario Hockey League. All of them told me that the first time they heard a racist comment or slur or any taunt of any kind was between the ages of 8 and 11, and it was at an ice hockey rink. And I clarified to make sure it was not at their schoolyard or some other place. They said no, and it was everyone from their own coach, opposing coaches, teammates, opponents, to parents. So as I look across this room, I'm telling you right now, that was a moment I said, we've got to start back down here. I'm using it like this because this is minor hockey. By the time they get to the OHL, they believe that this is the standard that you can have in hockey, that I can say what I want to, and nothing's going to happen, but, oh, maybe I'll get 2 minutes or a 10-minute misconduct. Then we're doing something wrong. So that's why this is such a privilege to talk to all of you today, to let you understand that there is a standard in place. We've all had to abide by the same rules. The rules are there against marginalizing people. There's no rule that supports marginalizing another person. There's only rules against it. So, you know, we always have that one parent who's screaming at the top of their lung, acting like a fool during the game. None of you have ever been that person, I know. But how many of you felt so awkward or ashamed and that person was on your team? I mean, represent your team as a parent on your team. It is time for us to flip the tables. We need to make that one person feel awkward and even though they're on our team, set that standard and that bar higher than it's ever been. That's what's going to help change the whole complexity when it comes to marginalizing one another or not. As I went on through the OHL, I started speaking to players and treating them as people. I said, you are people. I don't care what your stats are. I don't care if you're captain on the team or this is your first year. Let's look at you as a person. And that has made the biggest strides with me personally in the OHL and things that I've been able to accomplish in almost 3 years.
Tara, if we had something to take away, and those are great words to take away, what would you leave everyone with?
You know, these are really incendiary times, and there is a lot being leveled at all of us, and we've been through a lot collectively and separately. You know, I think I have personally been very outspoken about what I see as some of the issues in hockey culture. But I think that instead of shrinking back and being on the defensive, and I speak for all of us because, you know, I think we all confront this in one way or another. It's if we sort of flip that around and we realize that there is so much beauty and so much goodness, and it can be better. We want it to be better because we love this game and because we love people and because we love the kids who we are nurturing into young adults and adulthood. But it can be better, and we can learn, and we can be open, and we can try to put ourselves in other people's shoes, and it is not an indictment to say that there are issues within hockey culture. I don't care how you frame it. If you don't like those words, fine. But acknowledge what some of the shortcomings are. Nobody feels, you don't have to feel blamed. Nobody's throwing barbs. You know, I think you made that very clear, and I'm making that very clear too. This is not a personal indictment. This is, we are all learning together, and we are so much better off for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, and for the kids if we do.
Well said. Rico?
I guess the last thing I want to make sure is clear, and again, I hope this doesn't come across crass, but I want everybody here to understand that inclusivity does not mean push white people, white men away because it's time for somebody else to take over. It means scoot over at the table so everybody gets a chance to eat the same meal. We'll talk about what you're eating today, and tomorrow we'll talk about what we'll eat. Does that make sense? I'm hoping I'm making that clear, what I'm trying to say. That it's time for you to change your mindset if you already haven't. Don't worry about that term woke, or we're all too sensitive, because some of us are in my age group a little bit older saying this is just, oh, we're getting too sensitive and we're woke. The time was not right 30 years ago. The time is right now. So please be a part of the leadership that helps us change this. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great words.
Thanks, everybody.
Tara, Rico, thank you for coming out here today.